You're listening to She Speaks, a Let Her Speak podcast that celebrates women's fearlessness, resiliency, and readiness to change the world. Welcome back to the She Speaks podcast. I'm Catherine Porth, your host and the founder of Let Her Speak. Depending on the world and the culture you grew up in, the topics of sexuality and pleasure may elicit feelings of discomfort, embarrassment, or even confusion. That is why I'm glad that amazing women like Shannon Hamaker exist to empower more women to embrace their own sexuality and needs. Since the conversation you're about to hear from September 2020, Shannon has stepped fully into her passion of educating and coaching others. Without giving too much away from our follow-up episode with her, I will say that Shannon went through a transformation in both her personal and entrepreneurial life. I can't wait for you to hear about the journey she has been on in our next episode. But first, let's travel back to September of 2020 with Shannon Hamaker, Sexual Health Educator and Relationship Coach. Welcome, everybody, to our latest episode of the Let Her Speak, She Speaks series. And with me today, I have the fantastic Shannon Hamaker. She is the sexual health educator that we all needed when we were kids, and is also the owner of Pure Romance by Shannon. Welcome, Shannon.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, I would love to have you talk a little bit about what your journey's been. I mean, we learned a little bit about you in the She Speaks series post that we had on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn. But I would love to hear more about what that journey was actually like.
Sure. Well, I definitely did not grow up thinking that I wanted to be a sex ed teacher for women when I grew up, when people asked me when I was a kid. But as I started to learn about myself, and I moved from California to Tennessee when I was a junior. And I noticed that there was a big difference in the sex ed that we received. When I was in sixth grade in California, I had very comprehensive, very fact-based, we would ask questions and put them in a little envelope and they would read them out loud. And there wasn't much shame attached to it. And then I moved to Tennessee, Oak Ridge, when I was in high school. I was a junior, and I just noticed that there was a big difference as far as the conversations surrounding it, and there was a lot more shame around it, is what it seemed like to me. And I didn't think much about it, but then as I started my college journey, I went to school at UTC, and I took the human sexuality class, and my professor there was so embarrassed that she just told us to go home and read the rest of the information at home. And this was a woman who I looked up to in all my other human development classes, and she was just such an amazing person. And then to see her kind of get flustered and not talk about it, I just thought was very interesting. And I thought also that I would get all these answers to questions that I had growing up about sexuality. And I then decided maybe I should be like a marriage therapist. And I ended up just going the route of working the social service field. So I worked with kids in group homes for a while and did outdoor programming. And when I was laid off, that's when someone invited me to a party. And I didn't know what it was all about, but I knew that women wanted this information. And what I found was a group of women sitting in someone's living room, and they were just hanging on to every word that this woman said. And the woman that I watched was a nurse. So she came at it from a very different perspective, not the shame-based perspective. It was funny, but also empowering. And so I saw these women leaving with that information. And there was actually one woman who, she started crying, and she said, this is the first time where I felt like I'm not broken, because I've never been able to have an orgasm, and I've just been kind of waiting for my husband to do that for me. And she was leaving, I think, with like a blindfold and like little cards that would help them communicate. And I thought, okay, this is a social service. I'll just do this until I can find a real job. And it's just been 16 years now. And what I'm finding is that human sexuality is still evolving and we're still learning about it. And there are still women that just feel like it's the best place to learn about it is someone's living room, or now we're doing a lot of Zoom conversations and, couples consultations and things like that. So that's kind of in a nutshell how this whole thing started.
Wow. And I've been to an event that had a pure romance person at it. And so I know my best friend and I were extremely open about talking. We both went to Catholic school together our entire lives. But we kind of pushed against the typical teachings that were there, which were the same thing of like shame kind of shrouded everything.
Mm-hmm.
So we both kind of found our empowerment in being open to talk to each other about it. But I can imagine though, at these different gatherings that you're doing, is there, something that you need to do to start getting women to open up about it? Or do you find that because you've explicitly said this is a safe space to talk about sexuality, that it just naturally happens?
Yeah, it's funny. Everyone is so different. And the thing that we really want to respect is that 1 in 4 women have been sexually abused or harassed, and that's only what's been reported. So we know that if people are showing up, that sometimes it's maybe by peer pressure, maybe curiosity, but there's probably a lot of hesitation with the majority of women that are sitting in front of you. So the biggest thing that I try to do is build connection before I even start talking about sexuality. And it's really as much or as little as you want to share. Most of the party or the presentation happens in front of everyone. And then I sprinkle all these conversations and all these different products to help throughout the life cycle of a woman. We do have, products for all humans. And then I leave and I get to meet one-on-one with each person and answer questions that they have. But the cool thing is that I'll hear the conversations that are going on. So it's probably much like the conversations that you had with your best friend when you found that safe place and you knew that there was a respect and like a common thread of just wanting to understand. That's where the magic happens. So I hear these conversations in the living room and there's a lot of giggling and laughing, but there's a lot of questions that get answered and a lot of validation that happens that doesn't even come from me. It's just facilitating something that, turns into something bigger than they thought it was. And that's usually what I hear is when women leave, they're like, wow, this is totally different than I thought it would be, it's just so, I don't know. It just is fuel to the fire. It makes me want to keep doing this. Like, I feel like I have a social responsibility to make sure that everyone understands their bodies.
Have you found there being like distinct differences depending on like the age groups or the types of women that are in the rooms, or are there kind of some consistent threads that are amongst all of us?
There are, well, when I think about that, the last question that you asked me and trying to make everyone feel comfortable, one of the things that I do on the front end is I really ask whoever's having the party or the presentation, who are these women? Can you tell me a little bit about them? Are they nervous to come here? Are they college age? Are they moms? Or I've had parties with divorcees. So that's going to be a little bit different tone than, a bachelorette party, of course. So I find that there's common threads, but there are some differences based on where I do the parties and who is in front of me. But it's been great too to have these connections with college students. I had a group of several UT students last year that they just kept having get-togethers, and it's just so great to see how open they were in communicating with each other. And sometimes I'm like, oh, wait, what is that? I'm like taking notes and what's that Facebook group or what's that Instagram account I need to follow? And they're helping me understand. I feel like sometimes I'm the Aunt Shannon there to teach them the things that I wish I would have learned. But at the same time, there's so much that we can learn from other generations, whether it's postmenopausal or, these women that are in college. I get something from it every time as well.
Have there been any instances of like people bringing up things that they thought that they had heard that for a fact are absolutely not true at all? And do you have any instances of like really common ones that come up?
So many. Part of that difference in population, just to set this up, is doing parties, all over. You do see a trend in the South that there's a lot of misconception and just almost like a detachment from their body. Like they come to the party often saying like, what can I do to please him? As opposed to I need to learn more about my body. Now, I do see a change in that over time, especially with this time in quarantine and staying at home. Our sales and our parties are up right now, and we're doing a ton of Zoom interaction and consultations that way. And the resounding question has been, I'm reflecting and I want to learn more about my body, which is really cool to see that happening. So I think the biggest thing, I'm trying to remember what your original question was. I do that.
Some of the most common misconceptions.
Oh yeah. Common misconception. Okay. Yeah. So that gives you like the underlying foundation of, regionally speaking, there are misconceptions. And in the South, one thing that I've noticed is that the term masturbation or self-pleasure is like, it has like this effect, or like, giving women permission to figure out their bodies and just saying, you can touch your bodies because they are yours. I've had several women that have said, well, I had one in particular that had been married for 50 years. And after the presentation, she said, I have a really serious question. And I'm, after doing this for so long, you hear a ton of questions, but I always just try to make it seem like whatever it is, it's normal. And I just kind of leaned in and said, sure, I'm sure I've heard it before. And she said, will something bad happen to me if I touch myself? And I said, no, not at all. Actually, it's pretty important to know and understand what's going on with your body so you can stay in touch with it and communicate to your partner or communicate to your healthcare professional should you need to. So that misconception is a big one. And then the other misconception of not using a lubricant, like something's wrong with you if you need a lubricant, when in fact we did a study through the Indiana University and the Kinsey Institute, and we found that 85% of women prefer to use a lubricant. It's just more comfortable and safer. And we have found that there's a lot of things that make us dry. If you're dehydrated, then the vaginal walls are going to feel that dehydration too, which can make intercourse painful or, any kind of play painful for some people. So that's a misconception. And if you think about it, we don't think twice about putting lubrication on our skin with lotion or oils or putting stuff in our hair. But when it comes to our genitalia, it's just like, well, we need to make sure we're taking care of it down there too.
That makes sense. It's almost like it in a implicit, maybe not so much outside, but almost shameful that you need to use it. Which is, when you put it that way of, are you ashamed of having to use lotion every day or having to wash your face and put, a serum on or something every day? When you phrase it, when you put it in that perspective, it absolutely makes sense.
Yeah. There's so many things. Yes. And another one is that, all men want is sex. I mean, you have to think about all these things that we learned as we're growing up. And if we weren't talked about it, if you grew up in a Catholic family, I did as well. And you think about how sometimes the people that you look up to really weren't sure what to say about it. So they maybe didn't say anything at all about it, which can also be internalized as a bad or a shameful thing. So we're trying to retrace our steps and think about like what really serves us now that we don't need to hold on to anymore. So for some people, it may be that the lubrication thing, or that if you are not a virgin, that's a bad thing. You know, if you got married and you had several partners, that is necessarily a bad thing. Like, is that a bad thing? You really have to think, well, okay, is that a shameful thing that you need to carry, or does that really matter? You know? Mm-hmm. And then also that men have higher sex drives and women have lower libidos. There's all kinds of like staple stereotypes that have been given to us through society or church, that if you just get that weird feeling like, is that wrong or is that bad? Stop and think, is this true? And do I need to really carry this with me anymore? That's kind of the overarching theme of a party that I try to get across.
And I can imagine that a lot of women don't realize how much of that shame baggage that they've been carrying around with themselves for so long. Mm-hmm. What I'm imagining is that a lot of the conversations can also turn from the misconception of being sexual beings naturally, mm-hmm. and then being looked at as, someone who's not, like respectable in society because I'm a sexual person, because a woman is a sexual person. So do a lot of the conversations go around that topic?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We start a lot of times. I start by telling the people, like my guests, that I want them to imagine a big whiteboard, a giant whiteboard of things that they learned about sex. And so we'll like pretend to write things down. Sometimes I will get a whiteboard and just start writing them. That sex is dirty and it's gross, and you need to shave to be sexy, and you need to be sexy but not too sexy, and you need to please your partner before you please yourself. We just write all these things, and then we just erase it and talk about how you can rewrite your sexuality journey based on your needs now. And for some women, that's like, I don't even know what my needs are. So there's so many resources now that you can listen to podcasts, like Sex with Emily is a great one. There is a great website called OMG Yes, and that's through the Kinsey Institute, where they interviewed thousands of women and they found all these different types of self-pleasure that they can relate to. And these women are talking about how they use these different techniques to figure out how their body works. And so you have these women that are like, oh, I don't have a low libido. It's just that I had high boredom, and they're trying to figure out all these fun things that they didn't know, because we've had like McDonald's all our life. And meanwhile, there's like sushi and, these 5-course meals that you can choose from. You just didn't know they were right around the corner. You're going to have to dig for them a little bit. So those are some of the fun conversations that we have about holding on to those messages that you don't need anymore.
So one question I had, when I was about age of puberty, and my mom signed me up for like a mother-daughter kind of learning seminar, essentially, where we went like every weeknight for like a week or so. And we had these conversations about women and what our bodies are going through. And they would purposely, ask us to have conversations with our moms about what their experiences were like and the issues that they had or the feelings that they had and things like that. So I guess from your perspective or from your opinion, is that the point to start having those conversations of opening up about sexuality is like right around like puberty age?
It starts when the baby comes out of the womb. I mean, they have little sound bites of suggestions that you can just incorporate in everyday conversation with your child. So some people are even starting conversation about consent as early as diaper changing. Like, I'm going to change your diaper now. Okay. Or it's time to change your diaper, and like just having a conversation about that, and not encouraging your kids to hug people, like hug your aunt so-and-so. I had a mom friend that I asked her daughter if I could have a side hug. And she was like, no, thank you. And I was like, good for you, because we don't have to have, we want to teach our kids autonomy at the earliest age possible. And if they don't want to hug somebody, tell them they don't need to hug someone. And so those little conversations are starting that early. I love that your mom took you to that, whatever that was, that workshop. Do you remember the name of it?
No, it was put on by some local women. I remember it was in a church basement, which I found, looking back, like, oh, that's actually a little surprising. But it was a different church from what my school was. But yeah, it was just some local ladies that felt like it needed to be conversations that are had, and most mother-daughters aren't really thinking about how to have those conversations.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. What a gift.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so great. I know that the Unitarian Church has a program called Our Whole Lives that kind of goes through that, and other churches are starting to incorporate it. It's fascinating to me. And I'm reading a great book right now. I don't know where it is, but it is about the effects of the conservative Christian church overall on, even if you didn't go to church, just on our society. In the 90s and early 2000s, the whole purity movement came from such a great place of like, we want our kids to, like, they basically weren't sure what to say about sex, so they didn't say anything, or they said, just don't do it. So they meant well. However, they're finding a lot of just problems with marriages and conversations with women that really don't know their bodies. And, these women that saved themselves for marriage, and then they got married, and it's supposed to be this beautiful, amazing thing, but they really didn't know their bodies, and it wasn't as amazing as they thought it would be. So just all the things that have come out of that. And it's fascinating to me that the majority of religions, even like Judaism and Buddhism, and there's like the Karma Sutra, there's a lot of spirituality around sexuality in a lot of religions, but not with Christianity, which predominantly in our area and in the United States, that's what it is. So it's had its effects on it, but now we're seeing a lot of Christian leaders kind of coming around this topic and saying, okay, obviously the divorce rate is not going down. We're having some problems with kids being able to have conversations about this. And how do we respectfully present this as something that we want to talk about? And that is, that's where it starts with, I think, with the parents being able to learn alongside their kids at these early ages, and picking up books and just looking at the pictures. I know, as I've been learning with my kids, I have 2 kids, 12 and 7. And the bulk of the conversation has started around 9 or 10. We were talking about things in little sound bites as they were younger. And then all of a sudden, my older son, there's a book called What's Happening to Me. And you can kind of talk through what's happening with your body. And it also shows what girls are going through, and it talks about menstruation. So it's helping them understand that we are all going through different things, and menstruation is not a yucky and gross thing. And, what are tampons, and just talking about all of it. And a lot of times that happens in car rides or, nighttime routine where you're laying in bed before you go to sleep, and it's dark, so there's not eye contact and it's not as weird. So just little things like, did you have any questions? Or, we had a great conversation about the Cardi B song WAP.
Oh, yes.
That song that's coming out.
Yeah.
And learning about, my son was like, why is everybody so weird about that song? Like they're getting really upset about that song. And we had a conversation about what double standards are. And it was funny because we heard the song come on the radio, and right after that song was a male singer singing about a female body. And so we talked about like how that's kind of portrayed in the media, like, women as objects and pornography. And I mean, there's so many things that you can talk about. The best thing that you can do is just, as it comes up, ask questions like, what do you think about that? Or have you heard something about that? The minute that you start talking and just telling them everything, they'll probably tune you out. But if you gauge with questions of, have you heard about that WAP song? I don't know. Do you know what that's about? And just seeing where they're at and if they want to have that conversation. That way, if they're at that place and you don't open the door for conversation, then they're not going to feel comfortable for that next conversation. And they're probably just going to go to their friends, or they may Google it. And all the things that you can pull up if you search stuff on websites now. So on the World Wide Web.
And the lack of accuracy or correct information that they were finding. Yeah. I like that you bring up that sexuality occurs in most religions and a lot of cultures in different ways. Because it reminds me of, there's an old fable. When I was in high school, I took a class, a summer class at University of Iowa, that was about, we were studying like anthropology, and the woman was originally from Trinidad, Tobago area. And she brought up this old fable and had us read it. That was about a woman and several men. And there were elements of like sexual harassment that was happening to her. And the fable was that she had a piranha inside of her. And a man who did not treat her respectfully and basically forced himself on her would chomp down. But there was a man who treated her respectfully and treated her as a human being, as somebody who deserves to give permission for somebody else to touch her body. And the piranha didn't chomp down. The piranha went away. And wow. I thought that was, it's a story that I've never heard anywhere else. She had it in her books, and I can't even remember the name of it anymore, but I just remember thinking as a 16-year-old, I wish every boy and every girl had to read this short story, because I felt like it was such a good way of using metaphors to understand.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I bet boys really did think twice before.
Yeah, exactly. If there was really a piranha there.
So it's a Canadian fable?
No, it's a Trinidad, Tobago.
Trinidad, Tobago. Okay.
Yeah. If I can find it, I'll let you know. I just remember that story had a huge, I think about that story probably at least once or twice a year.
Oh, I'm sure.
Basically any time that, it comes up more prevalently in the news, or depending on what's going on at certain times of the year, I'll constantly think of that, of like, gosh, if we only had piranhas. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Can you imagine how many men would be missing an appendage?
Yeah. It would be a clear indicator too of, whether somebody was.
But it would turn around real quick. It'd be like, okay, that's a clear sign. That's a clear understanding that this happens. And then, that would be, that is fascinating. And how profound for a 16-year-old to hear that.
Yeah. And I just remember thinking like, wow, this is a very progressive way for a culture that for the most part, I doubt many people regularly think about the culture and the heritage and that comes out of the Trinidad and Tobago area. It's a fairly small populated area. But from what my professor was telling me, these are very common stories that children are brought up hearing about. And so I've always been fascinated with, like, you hear, the stories of the blood moon, for example. That's usually a common theme that pops up that tied to women's menstruation and things like that. But I feel like those are all things that you have to independently either hear somehow anecdotally and then go out and search for it. Really, within the United States, for the most part, you don't really hear about those stories too often.
Yeah, that's so true. Usually they're the typical, fairy tale story doesn't go into that depth and metaphorically speaking, to show what a true relationship looks like. Because it definitely does not look like the Cinderella or the Sleeping Beauty, or even what was the one with, if you read some of these old stories and these old fables, you're like, where in the world, what's the one with Peter that had a wife and couldn't keep her? Or
I know what one you're talking about. Peter something. Yeah.
Peter Piper.
My mom used to she had that one memorized somehow.
Yeah.
Because she thought it was ridiculous.
And you have these stories and these fairy tales, and when you really stop and listen to what it's saying, it's like, wait a minute, that's kind of messed up.
Yeah.
But did you ever hear of the, I think it's Marlo Thomas, the Free to Be You and Me?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you read that as a kid?
Well, honestly, I didn't hear about it until Sex and the City. And,
was it on there?
They mentioned Free to Be You and Me in one of the episodes. It's like season 5. And so I only heard about it then. And then I went and listened to it and read some of the stuff about them.
That's great. Yeah. I'll have to listen to that Sex and the City. But yeah, that was something my mom introduced to me. It was in the probably late 70s, early 80s. And I just remember the story of the girl that was to run a race, and if the boy beat her, he had to marry him. And she ran so fast, and she practiced, because it was part of the tradition that the woman would get married. And she made a bet with her dad, well, if I can beat him, then I'm not going to marry him. And he said, that's fine. And she ended up winning the race and being free and single. And, it's so fun to listen back to those stories, because I feel like they had an impact on me, kind of like the piranha story with you. And I think there's probably more, when you look at storybooks for kids, there's so many wonderful resources for LGBTQ plus information and informing kids about divorce and about what else? About their bodies, and like there's like the rad women in history books and the things that we didn't learn, a lot about growing up. So it's fun to see how that's being incorporated in a lot of different things.
Yeah, because we are both examples of the fact that those stories that seem, just in passing, if you're an adult, can have a lasting impact on how you think about things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that plays into how we operate in relationships, and, not just romantically, but the way that you perceive other people. And yeah, it's pretty fascinating stuff. The more you learn about the brain and the body and the connection that you have between the two, it's good stuff.
Now, you've talked a little bit about this as it relates to like our relationships with others, whether it's marriage or just a partner. But what are some of the other outcomes you either see or you hope will come about by, elevating and making this conversation more accessible and more open, that people are, essentially reclaiming their sexuality and understanding their sexuality.
I feel like it's a huge part of being fully present and operating in a conscious way. When you feel disconnected from your body, you have a hard time trusting your intuition. So I feel like there's a lot of people moving through this world right now that are trusting other people before they trust themselves. And that's the biggest thing that I would love to see, is that when you see that happen, and, I not only have women that I see once or twice because they're at a party, or, they have a presentation or, coaching with me, but I do have team members that are all over the nation. And some of these women have come out of divorce situations or started in college, and then you get to see them grow as a person. And one in particular is a woman that, her mom, in the most loving way, had told her that sex was just for the man. And so she held on to that for so long. She was young when she got married. She's like 20, I think. And they had kids right away. So not only like her frontal lobe, your frontal lobe is not formed until what, 25?
Yeah.
I think mine was 27. I'm just going to say that based on my decisions in my life. But for her, she's so young, a new mom, and doesn't know her body or trust it. And to see her go to a party and learn, oh, actually sex can be pleasurable. And, having conversations with her friends and getting, I don't remember what she got, like a lubricant. And we have like these enhancement creams that kind of add a tingle to your body, just trying to bring awareness and different sensation to your body so that's pleasurable. And she progressively is a little more confident and standing tall and just more vocal each time that I see her. And so much so that she ended up becoming certified to be an educator at a resource center to help women who are going through teenage pregnancy and helping them with decisions. And then also she became a consultant like myself. So she's now sharing this message with other people. And just to see the progression that she's had over the past 3 years is amazing. And it's not because she bought some lubricant and an enhancement cream. It's just because she was given permission to have pleasure. She learned that her body matters, and she learned how her body can feel good and how it brought a deeper connection with her and her husband. And that was the biggest thing. Like, she was like, oh my gosh, he thinks I'm like this new person, because before she just thought it was just for the man. So how would you operate if you thought it was just for the purpose of someone else? You wouldn't put much effort or, passion into it. So that is like kind of a visual of how I hope that a lot of people will learn to connect with their bodies and learn how it really does matter what your body is going through sexually, no matter what other people tell you. So there's, other messages out there like after menopause, it doesn't matter. And we're talking about ageless arousal these days, and how it's so important for you to continue to have orgasms and, have pleasure and connection, because it boosts your immune system and it really feeds into all these other areas of your life. So when you're trying to just move through the world and make basic decisions, you can move through it with confidence. And instead of feeling like you're having to swim upstream and look at everyone else to try to give you like information that you need or validation that you need, you can really just be like, no, I just made a decision that is in line with my values. And I know that this is the right thing, because I know my body and I know how it's telling me right now that this is what I need to do. And that's that's so powerful if you can have people moving through this world like that. So an orgasm a day will help. That's my prescription.
And how do you, recommend women that are wanting to discover their sexuality and wanting to come into that power, but maybe it's very awkward for them. They're not even sure where to start. Maybe they're not even to the point of being able to really openly talk about it. What are some resources or things that they could do to start that journey?
I would start with recognizing the stories that you're telling yourself, kind of like what we were talking about earlier, and really trying to decide if that is helping you or holding you back. Like, is that thought, or is that frustration, or that guilt, or that shame? Is it draining you, or is it, like, I think of a faucet. Like, is it a drain or is it a faucet? Is it giving you clean, like, good stuff that you need, or is it something that just needs to be washed away? So that can be done with journaling. And if you have not journaled before, there's so many things that you can Google, like journal prompts. And it doesn't even have to be sex-based. Like, it doesn't even have to do with sexuality, but you'll notice that there will be a trend of repeating behaviors and patterns that you see throughout your life that you're like, there it is again. Why does that keep popping up? And that always seems to be a problem. And I'm always the main character in that story. What can I change? Because we do have more control than we think. So I think journaling is a big thing. I also think that there's so many amazing books out there. And I would encourage anyone to get in touch with me, and I can kind of ask you a few questions. Are you a mom? Have you had sexual abuse before? Have you, what is your tell me a little bit about your past with sexuality. Were you raised in a conservative church, or was it the other end? We do have a lot of people, not a lot of people, but I've heard some women that were exposed to too much sexuality and the effects of that on them. So finding some resources that might help you kind of discover what you're holding on to, that would be helpful as well. And then there's so many fun things that you can listen to. And that's the thing, is that sex is supposed to be fun. It really is supposed to be just a fun, lighthearted, positive thing in your life that brings you joy and connection and, boost your serotonin and your dopamine. So if you are like, I must figure this out, I've got to figure out this block that I have with my sexuality, that may not be the best approach. If you can open with curiosity. And again, if you have like this feeling of like, oh, that's gross, or why would you ever do that? Stop and think, okay, why am I feeling that way? I'm trying to think of an example. Some of the more taboo things, like there's some people that are doing open relationships. That's been a big thing over the quarantine, is more people are like, we're going to be together for a long time. So what does an open relationship look like? And I used to have that, like, oh gosh, no, man and woman, like, together forever, married, one. And then you hear these stories of like, oh, okay, well, that may not be my choice, but apparently it's working for other people. So try not to go with the right and wrong thing, but more just open with curiosity. And I feel like once you open that door, you'll read one book, and then you'll go to another podcast, and then you'll go to another person, and they're like, oh, we actually have this group that we're doing this virtual presentation about sexuality. So opening that door is super important. The other place to start with a really good book is Emily Nagoski wrote a book called Come As You Are. And it's science-based on how your brain and your body operate as far as sexuality goes. So if you really just want to get down to the, like, without the shame and the opinions and all of that, that is a great place to go. It's called Come As You Are, Emily Nagoski. She's very entertaining to listen to, but the book is good to get because she does have some good descriptions on, like visuals of things that you can work on.
Okay.
So that's what I would suggest.
That's great. That's great. I'm definitely more of the scientific study, curious type of person. So that sounds really, really interesting. I haven't read that.
Yeah, there's so many. And it's fun once you learn the why behind a lot of things, you'll discover how it works for you. So if you understand how your brain and your body work, then that helps you kind of realize how you're making these different decisions. And I'm trying to think of what else. The Sex with Emily podcast is really good too. And she goes over all the things. So she's been around for a long time, and you can search specific things. Like she, does a lot of stuff about masturbation and how it's important and healthy for you. And for some people that's like, oh my gosh, wait, what? Trying to talk about that. And I can't believe I'm saying this because probably 12 years ago when I was doing this, I had people that asked me to not even say the word at their party. They would say, as long as you talk about the toys, like, and the products in a way that they're going to be used with someone else, like probably a husband, like, can you not say masturbation? So it's a fascinating thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot, I can only imagine just the amount of information from just you sitting down with all of these people over the years too, that you just know about how people react and talk about things, and can open that door to having those conversations and things.
Oh, go ahead.
I know it's a difficult subject to breach, even with your closest friends sometimes, if it's not something you guys have ever talked about before in your life. I like to think, at least for my age group, it seems like Sex and the City kind of gave us that okay to talk about it, since it was really popular, like right when I was going into college. And so everybody was watching Sex and the City, and it kind of became it's okay to talk about this because Carrie, Samantha, Miranda are all talking about it. So, but which I think is silly. It's a little silly that, it had to be a TV show that got you to kind of realize that it's okay to talk about. But, there's still so many, complex and nuanced things to sexuality that haven't been, spotlighted and haven't been talked about as openly. Like you brought up the LGBTQ community, for example, the opening up those conversations is still something that most people are really, really struggle to try to talk about openly.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I've been so happy to see how I feel like Knoxville just has this like little community. I did some volunteering with some of the like Voices for Trans Youth and before everything shut down, but just seeing and hearing what's going on, it's just I don't know. I feel like it's moving in a positive direction, not fast enough, but yeah, there's so much around that conversation, and then people of color and their lack of resources as far as health and resources go, and lack of like sex ed. And when it is sex education, it's more of, like you're going to get pregnant or STI based. None of it, most of them don't even talk about like the female anatomy with the clitoris and everything. They're still just saying that I'm doing this because I have a puppet. It's not around, but I have a puppet for my, but most people refer to, or a lot of people refer to the vulva as the vagina. And, so just learning proper terminology is so important too. And I forgot to say that with your kids, starting with calling it what it is, it's a vulva or a penis or testicles, and just like ear, elbow, there shouldn't be like a giggle or anything called other than what it is, so that they start to be able to talk about it freely and comfortably.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. And I've been paying attention. There's some organizations that are, I know, trying to build up, especially for the Black, Latina, women of color, people of color groups, and LGBTQ. But yeah, I agree. I'm glad to see that the conversations are moving, but just from friends and people that I support in those communities, it's like we need so much more. But I guess we can be at least happy that it is moving that way. So
yes, still a long way to go.
Yes,
and we've come so far.
Long way to go. I mean, we're still talking about rape culture, and it's 2020. So
I know.
Yeah,
it's moving. It's a slow and steady. We're definitely the tortoise.
Yeah. So last thing that I love to ask every woman is, is there, something that maybe most people don't know about you, or something that's a big part of who you are that maybe you don't get an opportunity to really talk about a lot because it might not be directly related to what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Oh, I have, that is tough. I don't know. I feel like I need to call my husband in on this one. Yeah. I've traveled a lot over the years. One thing that I've noticed is that for a long time I was trying to learn about everything else and everyone else, and trying to learn about different places. And I've been to 49 of the 50 states and traveled a lot with my kids and my family. And I would say right now that I'm an avid outdoor enthusiast, which isn't that big of a deal. I like to snowboard and mountain bike and just be outside in this beautiful part of the country that we are in. But right now, I've really immersed myself in learning about myself. So learning about the Enneagram. I don't know if you've heard about that.
Yeah.
So that has been it's had a huge impact on me as a person. And so with that has brought a whole new kind of like shift in my perspective on who I am as a person and how I can bring compassion and understanding to other people. So that's not like an extra hobby or anything, but that's really, when you say what's something that people don't know about you or you're involved in, that's immediately what I'm going to right now, because I've just seen it have such a big impact on my marriage and my interactions with the team that I lead. And I just am just really learning all about it.
I think has been so helpful for so many people too. And I know, I don't know if you follow Paris Woodhull, but she did a bunch of illustrations of the Enneagram types. So talking about a local, Knoxville artist, she just did a series. I think she completed it a couple weeks ago, but on her Instagram, she has all of them.
It's Paris Woodhull.
Yeah.
Okay.
Paris Woodhull. Yeah.
We've only lived here for 2 years. So honestly, when you had the Let Her Speak full day, I can't remember the summit.
Yeah. Yep.
I just was so happy because that was like, oh, these are my people. I met, so many amazing women that I still am in contact with. And, so I'm going to check out Paris as well.
Yeah. They're really cool illustrations. I get, is there such a thing as a personality or Enneagram type of test for like what type of, what your sexuality personality is?
There is. Yes. Okay. I actually I have a private Facebook group. So if anyone wants to join it, I have an arousal test. It's kind of like the 5 love languages, but there's 5 different types of arousal. And this has been interesting because you think you're supposed to react in a certain way as, you're attracted to a partner. And usually it's what we see in the movies or, what we have in our mind, what we need to do. but we're finding that there are several different types of arousal. So some people are more energetically aroused. So like the anticipation and the massage and and then some people are like, let's just get there. Come on. And I can't remember the name of that one. And then there are some people that are more on the kinky side, but some people don't realize it because they feel weird or shameful for wanting to do those things. So it's a woman who came up with this arousal test, and it's on my Facebook group. So, or I can send you the link to take the test, but there are descriptions of each type, and it's kind of cool to learn what your partner is so that you can meet in the middle and understand how the other person ticks, because you might be like the person that is like, let's just get there. But your partner may be like, well, I want more massage, or let's go do it out on the back porch, like the voyeuristic kinky side. So if you think it's supposed to be the same way, the same time, every time, not only does that get kind of boring, but that's not appealing to each person. And I think that's an interesting thing to be able to find out.
Very cool. Yeah. We'll share it with this video so people can for one thing, connect with your group on Facebook if they're interested in exploring their own journey of sexuality. But I'm really curious. I have some ideas of what I think I would be and what my husband would be, but I could very well be surprised.
Yes. Yeah. I'll send you the link.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for your time and for sharing. I don't get to have these conversations as much as right now, especially with just being indoors all the time and not around my ladies. But so I really enjoyed this.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for all that you do for the women in this community and outside of our community. I know that you were on it when we were in quarantine, and you asked who wanted to, I think I've got my little packet right here, who wanted to be a part of the Let Her Speak Pen Pal.
Oh, yeah, the Pen Pal program.
The Pen Pal program. And I connected with my pen pal who's in Florida several times, and it was like therapeutic for me. And I got some information from her, but it's just all the stuff that you do, like your branding is beautiful, and I love all of your ideas. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I actually have everybody's postcards still on my desk. They're right here. So once we're a little bit more open, I'm planning on mailing everybody else's postcards back to them to check in and see where they were in April and where they are now.
That will be good to see how far off or how close we are on that.
Yeah, I know. I'm still gauging because I feel like it's still a little early to send those back right now, but hopefully soon. All right, thanks so much, Shannon. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And thanks.
You too, Catherine. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Now that you've heard the background behind why Shannon is so passionate about educating others on sexual health, stay tuned for our next episode, where we get to hear the journey she has been on since 2020. This episode of She Speaks is brought to you by our amazing partners at First Horizon Bank. She Speaks is produced, edited, and scored by the very talented Travis Tench at Oak Hill Audio. If you loved the episode you just heard and want to support Let Her Speak's mission of elevating real women's stories, don't forget to follow, subscribe, and share at Let Her Speak USA. Together, we will make our voices heard.